Hello everyone and welcome to Avantika Designeering series or ADS as we like to call it. Every week on Wednesday, we feature design and technology leaders who share their professional journey, their thoughts on their domain of work, and designeering where the world of design and engineering meet. Make sure you follow us on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And with that, let's continue with your show.
The design industry has seen constant changes throughout the years, directed solely by users' needs and demands. With newer generation of people becoming active consumers, new trends keep getting introduced in the markets. Adapting to these trends can help designers understand the mindset of consumers and respond to their needs with innovative products. But the question that arises here is how can designers understand the needs and demands of customers to provide innovative solutions? To know more about this theme, in this episode, we interact with Somdat Sarkar, Design Director at India Baby Care and Brand Operations at Procter& Gamble. With over a decade of professional experience in design and strategy, he holds expertise in digital marketing, branding, packaging, retail design, communication design, and much more. So, let's get in conversation with him on our special episode on the occasion of International Design Day. Hey, welcome Somdat to Avantika Designeering podcast series. It's an honor and pleasure for us to host you on our show today.
Thank you so much, Rohit, for having me here. And as you know, I am a very passionate speaker as well as somebody who's always interested in the field of design and design education. So I'm just hoping that your listeners today are going to benefit from whatever I have to share from my experience in my life. So look forward to being here. Thank you so much.
Super. So let's start with an icebreaker question together, Somdat. A designer's life is incomplete without some form of creation out there. And iteration and evolution are key components of design. The question that I have for you is how can designers prepare for a new market innovation and further evolve the trend based on the design psychology?
All right. So this is very interesting, Rohit, and I think this is something that all of us face on a daily basis. And when I say all of us, I mean design professionals who actually work for the industry, right? And this is something that we always face as a constant, I would say, situation. That there are always trends and there are always things around us that are changing rapidly. And I think more so in the last 10 or 20 years, this is something that's almost like the norm, right? That there's a new technology that changes, there's something that becomes a trend. There was Instagram for communication, right? So we see that a lot of communication has changed, a lot of product centric design has changed, a lot of stuff that would actually drive desire in consumers has changed. And as designers, it is, I would say, imperative for us to be prepared very well for this change and adapt it, right? I'll give you a small example uh, about changes that come to designers and how we can probably adapt to it. So, how I see this is almost like you have to be a sponge, right? And I can take examples from my own life. I would probably cover some of it in the later parts, but I was studying to be a biologist, funnily enough. And then what happened is that, of course, I said that design probably is my calling, and I joined NID. And over there, what I learned is that this entire multidisciplinary approach is something that we always need to sort of inculcate in ourselves as designers, right? It is not if you are a product designer, doesn't mean that you only need to be surrounded by the world of product innovations and materials. It doesn't mean that you maybe cannot be interested in films or communication. So that is something I would say as an attitude, as a personality, as a little bit of a, I would say, psyche that needs to change in designers. While all of us, we may love to fall in love with our work, but as service providers, as people who are providing solutions for consumers around the world, I think it's very, very important for all of us to be extremely adaptable and hence evolve with the surroundings. So today, if there's a new technology change, you and I, we must be prepared for to learn it, right? Now, there's something called UI and UX, which I absolutely did not know when I was studying, when I was practicing design in the first 5 years of design. But now, if I do not know UI and UX, I think it's going to be a little bit of a handicap in all the work that I have to do and in my professional assignments as well, or probably work that comes my way. So, what does one do in this situation? I think what one does is really goes back to the drawing board and says, hey, there's something that's new, and how do I probably adapt to it? So the best way is to being, open to all these new challenges. Now, if I say that I'm sitting on a high horse and say, you know what, I'm a great graphic designer, I do great branding, there's no way I'm going to do UI and UX. But tomorrow, if your consumers and your clients who come to you and say that the entire world has shifted towards digital, and hence UI UX is so important, you definitely would need to have a little bit of understanding of this new field, and you cannot do that by being strict and stringent. So I would say the biggest challenge here, or I would say the biggest requirement here, is to be open, is to understand that something that you probably know today is not going to be the reality tomorrow, and be extremely adaptive. I mean, like, as we all know, the great Charles Darwin once said, like, the species that actually would evolve would survive. And I think this absolutely is the case for designers. If we do not evolve, if we do not adapt, we won't survive. So I hope that answers your question, Rohit.
Absolutely, Samdat, it does, and it actually, lays down the foundation for an interesting conversation that we're going to do with you. So, moving from that icebreaker, Samdat, to your journey. In fact, with over a decade of experience, you worked with some of the most prestigious clients over the years. You've experience in design and strategy across digital marketing, branding, packaging, retail design, and communication. Can you take us through your professional journey?
Absolutely, Rohit. So this is, in fact, what I call the most interesting part of my life, right? Which is my professional journey, and I love the fact that it is not very straitjacketed, and it's also connected to the first part where I say that we all need to be adaptive as designers, as creative individuals. So let me start with the kind of person I was. Right, I was growing up in a small town called Lucknow, which is not a small town any longer, but way back in the late 80s, early 90s was as small as it could get, right? The only two careers that people knew and probably were aware of were medicine and engineering. And unfortunately, I was somebody who was a good student, right? So for me, I always had only one career option, that I'm going to be a doctor, because, hey, it's a great career to I mean, be. But no offense to doctors, I think, I mean, they're wonderful people, we all know. I mean, they literally are lifesavers in today's world. But was it something which I was really cut out for, something I was passionate about? No, right? So it took me a while to discover my passion. It took me a while, I would say, like almost 5 years, to actually come to terms with the fact that I could take up a career in design. And I'm talking about late 90s, early 2000, when there was no internet, right? So how does somebody sitting in a corner of Lucknow know about what design is? Because there is absolutely no understanding on or exposure of design as a career. So I think what I did was, I said, what is the most logical thing I could do in my life? Let's become a biologist with probably a specialization in genetics. And I took up a zoology honors course in Presidency College, Calcutta, one of the leading colleges of India, right? And I think I spent about a year there, Rohit, when I really felt that I'm not cut for this. I was not enjoying it. It's not like I was doing well, right? I still was doing really well at studies. I probably was topping my class. But at the end of the first year, I said, hey, this is not for me. And I think that is when my family, in fact, my mother and my brother, they really motivated me and said, you have this gift of creativity. You have done all this art and craft throughout the school. Why don't you take this up as a professional career? And in fact, I sat for the entrance exam for NID, and I got through. And I think by God's grace, or as luck would have it, I think I've had a fabulous journey onwards. I went to the best design school in the country with some of the best design minds, got taught by visionaries in Indian design, as well as faculty who came from design institutes from all over the world. And as you know, we were taught in the Bauhaus and Ulm School of Design, which is almost like form follows function. Very, very user friendly, user centric. So I think my education was like beautiful. It was a beautiful mix of so many things, inspiration, so many different kind of courses that I attended. Right, while I did textile design from NID, I actually enjoyed the courses I enjoyed the most were courses in communication design as well as sustainability. Moving out from there, I had about 10 years of professional life in which some of it was spent in doing textile design. A couple of years was spent in Nagaland and Assam doing research on ethnic tribes and their textile traditions. I have spent about a couple of years, Rohit, you won't believe, but this was actually political advertising. So I have worked for, I think, leading parties in India and helped shape their political campaigns as well. So it was a very, very fun experience. And I think moving from there, I decided that I needed to do something which was a little more design centric. And I felt like branding was an area that I needed to improvise on and also learn. So I did work with like a WP company called Fitch, which is, I think, a great place to work. And I've spent 3 years over there working with various clients, understanding the intricacies of design. And after that, I worked for a little while at Raw Pressery, which is India's first cold pressed juice brand. Amazing, fun startup culture. And then I think I currently work at Procter and Gamble India as the design director of India brand operations and India baby care, where I work on a variety of projects like packaging, branding, retail, communication, digital marketing, UI, UX, you name it. So I think overall, in the last 10 plus years of my professional journey, I can only say that it has been extremely satisfying and rewarding as well. And I still feel like I learn new things every day. And I am so excited to go to work every day as well.
Wow, I'm sure that was exciting to hear. I mean, right from talking about political parties to being a part of of a startup like a juice brand, and now at Procter and Gamble. This is really exciting. In fact, Somdat, you joined Procter and Gamble from the agency background that you just mentioned, and the world you were about to enter was, I'm sure, unknown to you, and you had to navigate on your own as well. What were the challenges that you faced while navigating it, and how has this altered your design mindset while the transformation was taking place?
Uh, Very interesting question, Rohit. And I think I can answer that very well from my personal experiences that I've had in my professional life. So, when you are working at an agency, it's a very, very different culture. Agencies, as we all know, are the fun places to work, right? I mean, the people who work there are slightly irreverent, and it's a great team culture. You go there, you have fun, you listen to music while you're working, and it's slightly informal, right? I mean, I have worked in some agencies where you could go, you could walk into the agency in shorts, and sometimes you work all night, and the next day you go to office at like 4 p.m. So this was the kind of culture. At the same time, it was a lot of great learning. It was fun learning. There were less sort of boundaries. There were less hierarchies. Your creative head would probably sit with you on the editing table, and you would make some videos, or maybe you would take printouts and lay them out over the table, and people from all of the studio will come and join you. So it was, I would say, an extension of what we experience at our design schools. The way the entire functioning is, I think there's also a layer of client servicing in agencies. So as designers, you always don't have to, I would say, be at the professional forefront, because client servicing does that for you. Now, when you move to a professional life, or I would say a typical corporate client like Procter and Gamble, the situation there is slightly different. Actually, I'm saying slightly different because now we do have overall casuals throughout the week. So it's not like you have to go wearing like boring formals. It's not like that. So as designers, you still get to wear smart casuals. It's almost like it won't be as much fun as what it used to be an agency from an informal working environment. But I think overall, what really changes, Rohit, is that now earlier you probably were a part of a team where you actually were, like I said, surrounded by a layer that shielded, like you had a creative head, you had a client servicing. So there were people who were doing a lot of talking, and the formalities for you. In this case, you probably are also a working professional who is walking side by side with somebody who's done an MBA from a premier institute like IIM Ahmedabad, right? So you are that person's colleague, and when you guys are in the room, you guys get to present the same sort of opinions, or you work on the same business problem. So that's what is, I would say, a little bit of a challenge. It takes a bit of learning, right? And especially in a business environment, it's always about graphs and charts and business and what do I say? It's a little different than what we're used to and what our comfort allows us. But that's also a great unlearning for people like me, because if you're really open to learning and growing in a new environment and culture, I think this could also provide with a lot of new experiences for you. So what I did was actually, I tried and observed people, right? I tried and saw how they talk, how they presented themselves, how they talked. If they were in a meeting, how would they present their ideas? Because as designers, we're used to a different way of presentation or talking. So probably emulating their ways helps. Also, what helps is using their language. And it's, let me tell you, it's not very easy. That you will have certain abbreviations, and you will have certain business terms which designers may found intimidating. But I would say once you start using them, they are your best friends and icebreakers. Also, we have to get used to certain processes and certain frameworks, because as we all know, the companies and big sort of organizations run on frameworks. So if you were to present ideas, it needs to be probably catered to that framework for everybody on the table inside the boardroom to understand. And I think those are a few things which helped me step up and probably be where I am today. And let me tell you, I'm enjoying every day of my corporate professional life, and I absolutely do not miss going back to an agency.
Hey, did you know Procter and Gamble's Head and Shoulder brand creates a bottle made from up to 35% recycled beach plastic? The first big move in creating a one of a kind supply chain comprising thousands of volunteers and hundreds of NGOs. Wow, this is so exciting to hear. In fact, the sheer energy with which you have been talking about how much you enjoy your work, we all, while listening to this, can actually feel the enthusiasm and work, and that's so interesting to know the exciting culture which is there at Procter and Gamble, and how much you enjoy your work. In fact, Samdat, moving from there and taking a cue from you talking about customer experience and customer loyalty, we regard and empathize with the user and their feelings at all stages of the product development. In fact, true behavior is fueled by feelings. The question that I have for you, and something that I'm curious to know about, is how can designers use this fundamental fact to improve their product and influence the user's journey?
Great question, Rohit. And like I said, this is at the core and at the center of what we do every day at Procter and Gamble as well. And let me tell you something very interesting, that I have actually worked with a lot of corporate clients in my previous roles, and as well as with my current role today. In fact, design thinking is something which is taught to everybody in the marketing organization, in the entire a formal sort of corporate organization as well. It's almost positioned as something which people must learn to succeed, to respond to consumer needs, and especially people like in the consumer goods industry, fast moving consumer goods. You have to really be open to empathy and understanding what the consumer really wants. And I think we truly believe that consumer is the king, right? So my your question that you asked is slightly connected to when you say feelings. I would slightly put it as what about the consumer, right? And when I say consumer, you have to understand the consumer right in a 360-degree manner, and not just a very flat sort of a description of a consumer. For example, if you're talking about designing a right packaging for somebody who wants to use a herbal product, right? So you also have to understand what are the cues that the consumer in this case would probably like to have on the packaging. Now these are connected again to a variety of different factors, like where does she live, what is her family like, what are some of the challenges that she faces, what are some of her emotional triggers, what are, say, some of her lifestyle choices, what are the things that she aspires to do, what are her media habits, what does she like watching, what does she hate, and what is something that she would probably see herself 10 years from now. Now these are things which we all need to understand and react to. Now let me tell you a small example, right? And as designers, I think sometimes we also face this dilemma because we feel like, you know what? I mean, I'm also a human being. I also understand. Maybe it's the same thing, right? So let me design a packaging, or let me design a communication that I feel is right. And I think that is where a lot of designers, make a big mistake, because if you don't really put yourself there, right, in the consumer's place, so if you don't actually really understand what she's trying to say, or what her life is like, or what her struggles are like, and what will actually be some of the triggers for her, it's going to be very difficult. So if you design thinking that you understand this consumer without actually understanding this consumer, it's going to be extremely difficult to come up with a winning design or a concept or a packaging that probably she would like. So if she responds to, a certain color, if she likes a certain kind of communication, if there is something that tells her, hey, this is premium, I think those are cues which all designers must imbibe and understand and definitely use in the design. Otherwise it's going to be something which may not be long lived, or which may just be set up for failure. And like I said, this is something which is a cardinal rule for design that we practice every day, even in the heart of one of the biggest FMCG companies of the world.
Interesting. In fact, while you were talking about the products and the various aspects, design is one of the most critical components of creating killer innovations out there. And along with the design driven approach that you've been talking about, strong brand presence and visual communication are used to create both the market opportunity as well as customer value. And this is something that we've so well seen in FMCG as a sector. What I wish to know from you, Samdat, is how can designers interrelate brand and innovation to create a stronger and more successful relationship with customer?
So, like I said, brand and innovation, I think they go hand in hand, Rohit, right? So, at the heart of your brand, there should also be innovation. And at the heart of an innovation, there has to be a brand. Let me give you a small example of a brand that we all love, right? Now, just think about Nike, think about Coca Cola. And these are some of the brands which I think are universal, which are like giants, they're mammoths, and everybody just loves them. What makes them so relatable to the consumers, right? What makes them resonate with everybody that spans across age group, right? You would never hear from anybody that, Coca-Cola is built for a target audience of like X to Z. I mean, Coca-Cola is universal. Nike is almost universal for people who are active, and of course who would be running, walking, doing all sorts of physical activities. So if you talk about I think brand, and if you talk about innovation, I wouldn't say that they are mutually exclusive, or they don't go hand in hand. In fact, if you have a brand that does not innovate, you will set yourself for failure. And when I say innovation, innovation is multiple things, right? Innovation is probably making a new product that is in sync with times. So you will have, I mean, as we all know, earlier soda used to be such a big category, and now with this whole advent of people moving towards healthier lifestyles, we need to probably change what the product is. So while maybe the original product remains the same, I mean, of course, you cannot change Coke because it's so iconic, but then your portfolio needs to diversify. And if you see today, the portfolio that Coca-Cola has, I think they do have a lot of healthy beverages as well. And plus, they've acquired a few companies that are into the field of healthy beverages. So I would call that as, an innovation or keeping up with times. If you also look at their communication, the communication is also in sync with the changing times. So it has really moved away from really selling your product. to actually selling an emotion. When they say open a bottle of Coca-Cola, you open happiness, right? And I think this is one of the long-standing campaigns that has been doing rounds, and they have done so many beautiful executions, outdoor executions. They have done actually, environmental executions where it's, if you remember, there was this beautiful refrigerator, and I think this was I think a few people in Dubai who were away during Eid, and they could see their loved ones, and they both could open a can of Coca at the same time. I think these are innovations that probably have the brand at the heart of it, because what the brand is, the brand says that when you have a Coca-Cola in your hand, you can open happiness, and this innovation is probably is exemplifying the same. So as designers, I think we absolutely need to walk this bridge, and at the bridge, I mean, we need to be at the center, at both the ends. At one end is innovation, at one end is brand. We probably need to find a midway. We cannot really sort of swing the pendulum at one end and say, I'm going to like really really be innovative and completely lose the brand. For example, if I do make like healthy beverages and make them start looking like all these new age drinks and health juices that are there, I don't think people are going to start liking Coca-Cola so much, and it may of course cause a lot of downside of business for them. So I think brand innovation absolutely go hand in hand.
Interesting. In fact, when you were talking about the environmental aspect, one of the questions that, I thought about is, with the world being more interconnected, brand needs to become aware of their impact on the environment and society as a whole. And packaging and branding need to be about outreach, showcasing, say, the positive change and responsibility. What are some of the ways designers can design packaging that reflect their brand's social and environmental consciousness, according to you?
Great question, Rohit. And I think this is something that all of us today feel very closely, and especially I would say the millennial generation. I think this is one of the issues that is close to our hearts. And if you look at all the surveys, all the consumer surveys that are done periodically, brands that actually talk about sustainability and talk about, like a force for good, are brands actually that are preferred by consumers, and they do have a great sense of brand loyalty from the consumers as well. Coming back to your question of packaging and how can we probably look at packaging to reflect the brand's ethos and the brand fundamentals of sustainability, I would suggest that there are few ways in which people need to look at packaging, right? Packaging today is, as you all know, is probably one of the biggest concerns, right? And I think one of the largest concerns is that it is not really recycled properly, or it's not disposed of properly. So this will be something which I would say be a concern for, especially for FMCG companies as well. But we all know that sustainable packaging is something which again may not live the test of all the traveling or all the transportation or all the supply chain that all these goods require to be in, right? So I would suggest that designers start looking at different materials, different executions of materials, maybe better communication that reflects how to recycle, how to dispose it off, and probably look at innovative packaging, which I must say is something which is the future, right? And when we talk about innovative packaging, it could be using materials that have been recycled, having materials which actually have a certain kind of certification which is non-polluting, which will also in turn probably have the packaging and manufacturing industry respond to these positive changes as well, because when there would be a demand, I'm sure there would be a supply. So as designers, I think it's always our duty, and I would say as also individuals who care about the earth and the environment, I think whenever we have some ideas about packaging, we must, and this is something I practice as well, I always take a sustainable example on the table for everybody to see and say, guys, can we probably have a look at that? How does this look, by the way? And I think that's a great point to have as a discussion. And once we start really feeling passionate about this as a cause, I'm sure everybody else would follow.
Hey, did you know Procter and Gamble, with its iconic program Procter and Gamble Shiksha, aims to provide children from underprivileged backgrounds access to holistic education. Through their initiative, they have developed and funded over 1,800 schools, impacting over 1.4 million lives. Absolutely, doubtless, and we see so many global brands being conscious about it and taking so many steps, towards coming up with great innovations. We did an episode with Adidas a couple of months ago, and they spoke about how they've created these environmental friendly shoes with waste and a couple of interesting innovations. In fact, that brings me to another interesting angle, and which is talking about the millennials and the Generation Z. It constitutes the largest online audience and have more buying power than any other generations, probably. They value transparency, individuality, sustainability that we were talking about, quality, and in fact, even minimalism. The question that I have for you is, how can brands crack the tricky generation of millennials and upgrade themselves according to their dynamic requirements?
Great question, Rohit, again. And this is something which I do for a living, right? And I think most of the brands that we have today, the core audience for us is millennials. So I think the first thing that I would suggest is to start understanding the millennials. And this is connected back to when I said that you have to really empathize with the consumer and let this consumer not be a slide on the PPT. So I would suggest spend some time with them to understand. And I'm talking about whenever we are designing anything that requires a really, really, I would say, deep understanding of the consumer, be it a product, be it an interface, be it a packaging, right, which a consumer is going to use. All these things really need to be tied into what the consumer psyche is. So, a good starting point would be to start with understanding the consumer and really understanding their behavior. So, what I do sometimes is, in fact, if I'm designing for a certain age group, I try and do Instagram stalking, right? I try and see what they're saying, what they're sharing, what they like, what their voices are, and it helps me get a mental picture of if I'm designing something, would it really be up to the mark that these millennials have set up, and what would it really get the love that I'm hoping that my designs get from them. So while that is the starting point, what you've just said is very, very important about the 4 or 5 points, right? That brands have to be transparent, right? So today, if you're talking about a certain kind of ingredient in your product, it definitely needs to be that. You cannot have something which is not there in your product and you cannot claim it, right? So doing that is almost a consumer suicide. Consumers will start hating you, they will start trolling you, and with today the voice of social media is so much that things can get magnified like anything. So we definitely need to be extremely transparent. So gone are the days of the 80s gimmick, right, when you would say that, okay, I have like this XYZ thing in me and it will do like this amazing thing to you, and boom, like people have started using words like, hey, your advertisement looks photoshopped. So if this is what consumers are talking today, millennials are talking today, I think we definitely need to respond to what they would find realistic, authentic, and relatable. To your points of individuality, of course, I think the product today or the packaging today needs to speak to the consumer. So if the consumer is an 18-year-old girl who really is wanting to break all the rules, exploring life, is really bubbling with joy, excitement, and also has certain fears about how she looks, and like maybe it gives her confidence to look a certain way, I think the packaging needs to also respond to her and her fears and maybe just talk to her. So having that sense of individuality somewhere cued in to the packaging would help. Sustainability is definitely, like I said, is a need of the hour, and I don't think brands can shy away any longer. So be it, I think any start is good. So while I know it's very difficult for conglomerates to start completely transitioning to everything that's sustainable, but I think small footprints can also help, right? So just maybe using less water, using just less electricity. I think that's a great start. And of course, quality. I mean, today consumers have multitude of goods, right? You have homegrown labels, you have brands that are running out of garages. So you definitely have a big competition out there, and if you slack on quality, I don't think your consumer is going to come back to you again or give you chances, because gone are the days when there were two or three brands. Today there are 200 brands and consumers are spoiled for choice. So either you give quality or be, set up for failure. And to minimalism, Rohit, I have a little bit of a different point of view here, because I think minimalism is something which I feel is a trend. So if your consumer today says that they like minimalism, I think your design and your product must reflect that. But if your consumer is somebody, again, depending on the geography, depending on their emotional triggers, depending on the culture that they come from, if they like things that are over the top, that are joyous, that are not minimal, I think you must provide them what would really get you their love.
While you were talking about offering choice to customers, one of the interesting aspects that I want to bring to this conversation is about the entire technology intervention in the conversation. And while we talk about it, one of the things that we cannot escape is the rise of e-commerce, which has definitely served as a perfect catalyst for creating a whole new type of retail experience out there. In fact, unique design features, technological advancements, and customizations are revitalizing physical stores in the future. The question that I have for you, Somdat, is how can we deliver a highly relevant, personalized, and powerful retail experience that resonates with consumers?
So this is a situation, Rohit. I think we all living today, right? All of us probably are consumers who shop heavily on e-commerce, and especially after the entire lockdown hit us, right? I think the activity on e-commerce platforms has risen like manifold, right? The business has quadrupled probably on a lot of other platforms. So when we talk about retail today, Rohit, I'm of an opinion that retail is not physical and digital and e-commerce any longer. I think it's omni-channel. Consumers don't really today shop only from one place. So we have to again connect back to what the consumers are, what their habits are, how they purchase, and probably offer them a right kind of a customized solution. Now, for example, Rohit today wants to buy a pair of running shoes. So what does Rohit do? Rohit today is sitting, in the maybe in his office in the lunch break. Rohit opens his phone and just types running shoes. What the AI in the background does while Rohit is doing this on Amazon is that it also picks up cues on Google as well, and Rohit starts seeing ads on Facebook, right? And I think, like, while a lot of people find this an invasion of privacy and nuisance, I think I come from the school of thought that really thinks that if you're seeing relevant advertisement, I think it's great, right? uh, I think I would not like to see advertisement that I don't care about. So if I really want to buy a shoe and I'm going to be investing a good 5,000 rupees in it, I'd rather do my research. And this is something which a lot of millennials do. The purchase on a whim or impulse buying is not so long something that consumers do, especially for higher priced goods. So today Rohit probably saw advertisements on Google, and of course then he got targeted by an Amazon ad again, because if he did not purchase it, suddenly he gets an email in his inbox that says that, hey Rohit, you were looking at something, what happened, you didn't buy it, here's a discount for you. So these are all elements of, I would say, highly customized shopping experiences, right? While Rohit has still not shopped, Rohit is in the mindset of shopping. It's still pretty much is tailor made for Rohit's online shopping behavior. Now, what Rohit does probably is just goes to he says that, okay, I'm going to go to market and maybe also check out some stores and see how the shoes look, because of course I want to see how it looks, and I'm not very sure how e-commerce works. So what Rohit does is that he goes to the nearby store, a shoe store. He looks around. He takes his phone out, and he just clicks a picture. And I think Google tells you what that is, and where it's available nearest to you. What are the discounts on it? At the same time, I think the store itself will have several, I would say, factors or several ways in which they will try to entice you. They will have a salesperson who again is the physical embodiment of how to make that sale to you. I'm sure the environment of the place is also going to be nice. There's going to be nice lighting, nice seating. There's going to be probably music playing that's really pumping up the energy. So you may feel like, hey, I need to buy this right away. So I would say that in today's environment, we cannot really isolate physical or digital. It's an omni-channel experience, and at any point in time that you go, you probably are in a state, or in a, I would say, you are very very capable of doing that shopping from wherever you are. And this is not something which I think brands need to learn, because Rohit, it's already here. I mean, and we are all living with it, and we don't probably know what's going to happen in the next 5 years. It's going to be extremely crazy, but let's just all see and evolve with it.
So, Somdat, that brings us to our last question. At Avantika University, we coined this term called as designeering, which is a base ideology on which we coach our students, the blended approach of design and engineering. The question that I have for you is, do you see design and technology blend in your field and your processes? What do you think about it?
So a great term, Rohit. I think design engineering is something which probably is the future, and I can totally see that say that, because today in our day to day work as well, I can see glimpses of this. Today, design and technology are not exclusive any longer, and let me tell you, there are touch points on which design actually needs to be married to technology. For example, if you're talking about packaging, right? While you may design a great looking, beautiful packaging on a computer screen, now how that translates into an actual packaging will also be technology. And as we know, printing technology has evolved. There's several kinds of ink, there's several kinds of material, there are several kinds of processes that you can do to get the right kind of packaging. So while you are a designer, you cannot be completely not aware of technology. And I would say that while it's great to have an understanding of technology, you don't need to be an expert at it, right? So please don't be intimidated if there's technology. Do reach out to people who are going to be your fellow colleagues or your friends who are probably going to help you out with this technical expertise. But it's extremely important. Technology is also equally important when you're designing, I would say, something as different as a digital interface. Because in UI UX design as well, there's technology at the back, right? There's coding at the back. So while you may design something that looks great, you may design a great interaction, something that looks great, but the tech guy will tell you, guys, this is going to take a lot of time to load, and that means that your consumer is not going to like it. So you need to change your design, which is why I would say technology is your best friend, and you need to keep it really really close. So I am so happy to hear, Rohit, that design engineering is something that probably you guys are looking at, because I really feel this is truly the future.
Thank you so much, Somdat. This was highly energetic conversation with you, and I so wish that we could continue this conversation. So much more to talk to you about, but unfortunately, due to the paucity of time, we will end the show here. But I'm sure that our listeners will get in touch with you on social media and interact with you on their questions ahead. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much, Rohit. It was a pleasure being here and just interacting on so many issues that I think are the need of the hour. And absolutely look forward to answering any further questions that your listeners may have. Thank you so much for having me here.
Hey there, we hope you enjoyed our show. Do write to us on ads@avantika.edu.in. We look forward to your opinions, feedbacks, and suggestions of speakers you would like us to host on this show. Do tune in our channel next week on Wednesday for a new story on Hubhopper or wherever you get your podcast from. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter.